The weeks after the cleansing ritual passed in a blur, but they were far from peaceful. Lily, who had once been so bubbly and bright, now seemed like a shadow of her former self. She was quieter, more withdrawn, and had developed the unsettling habit of avoiding her own room entirely. Sarah noticed the changes but didn't want to admit the fear clawing at her heart. She wanted to believe it was over, that the nightmare had ended when Isabelle had shattered, but deep down, she knew better. It started with small things: Lily refusing to sleep in her bed, choosing instead to fall asleep on the couch or curling up in Sarah's bed, as if terrified of being alone. Sarah asked her why, gently coaxing her daughter for answers, but Lily would just shrug and say something vague like, "I don't feel safe there." Every time Sarah pressed, Lily would change the subject or walk away. One night, as Sarah sat alone in the living room, she watched her daughter drift off to sleep beside her. Lily's face, once bright and full of life, now appeared pale, with dark circles etched beneath her eyes. It wasn't just exhaustion, something deeper was at play. She was being drained, piece by piece, and Sarah didn't know how to stop it. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, a soft tapping sound pulled her from her reverie. At first, Sarah thought it was rain, but the sound was too steady, too deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. The noise came from Lily's room. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she stood up, her body stiff with apprehension. She tiptoed down the hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. As she approached Lily's door, the tapping grew louder. It was as though something or someone was inside, waiting for her. Sarah pushed the door open slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was dark, save for the soft glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. The air was heavy, suffocating even. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of the noise. Then she saw it. Her blood ran cold. Isabelle, the doll, which had been shattered into pieces during the cleansing ritual, was sitting upright on the shelf where it had always been. But this wasn't the broken doll Sarah had last seen. Somehow, impossibly, it had been reassembled. Cracks still marred its porcelain face, but its eyes, those unsettling blue eyes, were wide open, staring directly at her. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. How was this possible? How could the doll be back? She stepped closer, her heart hammering in her chest. As she reached out, the doll's head snapped toward her with a sickening jerk. Those eyes, now darker than ever, locked onto hers, and a slow, twisted smile spread across Isabelle's face. The air in the room felt colder, suffocating, and Sarah could feel the malevolent energy radiating from the doll. Panicking, she turned to leave, but something stopped her. She looked down and saw Lily, lying on the floor, motionless. Her daughter's face was pale, her lips slightly parted, but her chest was barely rising. Sarah dropped to her knees beside her, shaking her. "Lily," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "Lily, wake up," but her daughter didn't stir. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she scooped Lily into her arms, her heart racing with fear. She couldn't understand what was happening. How was the doll back? How had things gotten so much worse? She needed help. She needed to find the paranormal expert who had performed the cleansing ritual. Maybe there was something they had missed. Maybe there was a way to save her daughter before it was too late. As she cradled Lily in her arms, Sarah felt a sudden shift in the air. The room grew darker, colder, as if all the warmth had been sucked out of the space. Then she heard it, a deep, guttural voice that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. "She belongs to me now." Sarah's blood ran cold. She whipped her head around, searching for the source of the voice, but there was nothing. The room was empty, save for her and Lily. But the voice, it was unmistakable. It wasn't coming from the doll. It was coming from her daughter. In a panic, Sarah grabbed Lily and ran out of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to get out of the house, away from whatever had taken hold of her daughter. She stumbled into the living room, her breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. But as she reached the front door, she froze. There, standing in the hallway, was Isabelle. The doll's face was twisted into a grotesque smile, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Sarah's stomach churned with fear as she realized what was happening. Isabelle was no longer just a doll. The spirit had taken full control of it, and now it was coming for her and for Lily. The voice returned, this time louder, more insistent. "You can't take her." The doll's mouth didn't move, but the voice reverberated through the house, shaking the walls. Sarah's legs felt like they were going to give out beneath her, but she forced herself to move, to run. She had to get away. She had to save Lily. As she reached the front door, the lights in the house flickered and the temperature plummeted. Sarah could see her breath in front of her as she fumbled with the lock, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Finally, the door swung open and she stumbled outside, clutching Lily tightly against her chest. But the nightmare wasn't over. As Sarah looked back at the house, she saw Isabelle standing in the doorway, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. The doll stepped forward, its small porcelain feet tapping softly against the wooden floor. "She belongs to me," the voice hissed again, this time with a growl of menace. Sarah didn't wait to hear more. She ran down the street, her legs burning with the effort, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no plan, no idea where to go, but she knew she couldn't stop. Not until she and Lily were far, far away from that house. And from the doll. They eventually reached an old church on the outskirts of town. Sarah, gasping for breath, pounded on the door, praying that someone would answer. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, and an elderly priest stepped into view. His kind eyes widened as he took in the sight of Sarah and her unconscious daughter. Without a word, he ushered them inside, closing the door firmly behind them. The air inside the church felt different, lighter, safer. For the first time in hours, Sarah allowed herself to breathe. But the relief was short-lived. The priest listened as Sarah explained what had happened, his face growing paler with each passing detail. When she was finished, he sighed heavily and crossed himself. "The doll," he said quietly, "is not just a vessel for a spirit. It is a conduit and anchor that ties the spirit to this world." Sarah's heart sank. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do we stop it?" The priest hesitated before speaking. "To break the bond, we must destroy the conduit completely. But it will not be easy. The spirit will fight to keep its hold on your daughter. You must be prepared for what's to come." Sarah nodded, though her hands trembled. She would do whatever it took to save Lily. The priest led them to a small room beneath the church, where he began preparations for a final ritual. The room was dimly lit by flickering candles, and the air was thick with the scent of incense. Sarah held Lily tightly, whispering words of comfort, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to reassure, her daughter or herself. As the ritual began, the room grew colder, and the faint sound of tapping echoed in the distance. Isabelle was coming. The candles flickered violently as the priest chanted, his voice steady despite the growing tension in the air. Sarah held her breath, praying that it would work, that they could finally be free of the spirit's hold. But then, the lights in the room went out completely, plunging them into darkness. Sarah heard a low growl and the sound of porcelain scraping against the floor. Isabelle had arrived. The doll's voice filled the room, louder and more menacing than before. "She belongs to me." The room shook violently, the ground beneath them cracking, as if the spirit was tearing through the very fabric of reality. Sarah's heart raced as she clung to Lily, refusing to let go. The priest continued his chanting, his voice rising above the chaos, but Isabelle's presence grew stronger with each passing second. In one final, desperate attempt to save her daughter, Sarah stood up, cradling Lily in her arms. She stared into the darkness where she knew the doll was standing, her voice trembling but resolute. "You can't have her," she said, her voice shaking. "I won't let you take her." For a moment, everything was still. Then, with a deafening crack, the room exploded in light. The doll shattered into a million pieces, and the spirit let out an ear-piercing screech before vanishing into the void. Lily gasped, her body trembling as she returned to consciousness. Sarah collapsed beside her, tears streaming down her face. They had won. The nightmare was finally over, or so they thought. Because deep within the rubble of the shattered doll, a single porcelain shard began to glow. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more chilling and spine-tingling stories like this. Stay tuned for more eerie tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Share with your friends and prepare for more thrills coming soon.